All right, well, everybody, welcome to our Employee Engagement Techniques training, which is going to be hosted by Kimberly Silk. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we're going to get started with the training. I'd like to thank the Institute of Museum and Library Services for presenting this training for us, or holding this training for us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kimberly Silk so we can begin.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here again with the PLAN team. Today's presentation, as you can see from the title of the slide, we're going to talk about employee engagement techniques. In preparing this presentation, I spent some time doing some research to catch myself up on the latest approaches and thinking surrounding employee engagement. And I looked at sources that were more general to organizations of all kinds, as well as sources that looked at employee engagement specifically in libraries and in public libraries. So here's the agenda for today. First, we're going to start with just some overview of employee engagement. I've got a definition, different where people are in the organization in terms of their levels of engagement, and why we want our colleagues and our staff to be engaged, and why it's a good thing. Then we're going to talk more about specifically in a public library environment. And, there are some very specific and unique conditions in public libraries these days. So we're going to not ignore that elephant in the room. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And then we're going to dive more into the techniques themselves and some actual actionable knowledge around employee engagement that you can think about adopting in your organization. It is a 2-hour webinar, so I'm probably going to present for the first 30-40 minutes. I invite questions either in the chat, or if you'd like to speak using your microphone, we can do that. But we'll have lots of time for discussion after I'm done going through the slides. And at any time, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. I prefer an interactive webinar if we can, or wait to the end, whatever you feel most comfortable doing. I also want to assert that I endeavor to create a safe place for us to have discussions around sensitive topics. So I hope that you feel comfortable and at home here with me. All right, here we go. So let's start with a definition. And employee engagement is is really about the level of enthusiasm and connectedness that individuals who work in an organization feel towards the work that they do, the team that they work with, and the organization they're working for. When a really engaged person in an organization at every level of the organization, all the way from directors, managers, supervisors, staff, when our people are engaged in what they're doing and in what the intention of the organization is, then we have such a healthier work environment. And even on the most challenging days, engaged employees will have a better sense of positivity and optimism and investment in the work that we're doing for our communities. We know that when employees are highly engaged, they demonstrate a passion for learning and for growth, and tend to go above and beyond what the expectations of their role is, simply for the pleasure, the curiosity of learning and growing within that organization. Years ago, there was more of an emphasis on job satisfaction. So job satisfaction is not quite the same as employee engagement. I mean, they are connected, Absolutely. And some might even say that they're two sides of the same coin. A job satisfaction is a little bit more about what is the organization doing for me, so that I feel satisfied in the work that I do. Job satisfaction can be achieved in a few different ways. Pay is always a really important one, but also the benefits that come along, whether it be healthcare benefits, flexible hours, the nature of the culture is very, very important. The working conditions, work-life balance is also very important. Feeling like you, at the end of a workday, you feel a sense of satisfaction around having accomplished something, feeling that you've made some progress in your day. And also growth, career opportunities. Is there room for growth and development within the job that someone has? That's really job satisfaction, whereas employee engagement is just more than that. An engaged staff person is committed to the organization. They're motivated to do their best work because they really care about the health and success of the organization. There's a sense of loyalty on both sides, that the staff person feels loyal and committed to the organization, and they feel that they're getting that back from the organization as well, which of course engenders a sense of trust in the organization. And again, a two-way street, that the individual has developed a sense of trust and loyalty to the organization because they feel that they're getting the same thing back. And perhaps an important difference between job satisfaction and employee engagement is that job satisfaction is really just a one-way street. So what can the organization do for the staff person to make them feel satisfied? So satisfaction is different from passion and commitment, but we need to be able to achieve job satisfaction before we can move towards employee engagement. So again, job satisfaction can be achieved through making sure that they're compensated appropriately and competitively, that there is a work environment that is conducive to making them feel satisfied in their jobs, that there's career growth opportunities. But it's really the employee thinking about what can the employer do for me. Whereas employee engagement is really two-way. So the employee and the organization have shared goals. They have shared values. They share the vision and the mission of the organization. And there is a culture of celebration that really thinks about how can the organization and the individual work together in partnership to accomplish really, really great things. We need employee satisfaction before we can get to employee engagement. An employee can be satisfied with their jobs without necessarily being deeply engaged in their work or with the organization. The research shows that employees who have higher levels of engagement are more likely to be satisfied with their jobs. And this can lead to increased productivity for employers and just a healthier, more fun, enjoyable culture overall. Engagement requires not only satisfaction, but a sense of trust and commitment and motivation on both sides, the individual and the organization. Gallup has an excellent collection of resources on employee engagement. And one of the reports that they do every year is a state of the workplace study. And I've included that in the list of sources that we'll go through at the very end. What we're looking at here is the engagement hierarchy that Gallup has put together in order to explain how you want to ideally move your organization from fulfilling the basic needs of your employees all the way up to thinking about growth of the organization and also growth from the individual's point of view. So it sort of looks like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So at the very basic level, individuals need to know that they're going to have everything that they need to do a good job. So they need to have materials, equipment, they need to have a workplace that is comfortable, things like perhaps a computer system that works well, is reliable, ergonomic furniture, a comfortable chair. These are basic needs, along with having a very clear sense of what their role is and what is expected of them. These are the basic foundational things that are needed as we move towards employee engagement. The next most important thing is management support. And in a few slides, we're going to talk more about how important the leadership roles are in an organization in order to facilitate employee engagement. Management needs to be very clear about encouraging an individual's contributions, showing that they care not only about the role in the work, but about the individual who is taking on those things, recognizing that that there is recognizing whenever there are wins and being aware and conscious and caring when things don't go smoothly. Sometimes that happens, of course. And a manager who can help an individual feel valued and realize what their strengths are and be really clear about the value that the individual is bringing to the organization, that is part of the next step towards employee engagement. The next level up is, of course, the individual's role within the team. We all know what it's like when a team is working really well. Probably a lot of you are familiar with having developed really deep and meaningful friendships at work. Certainly I have over the years. And some of my closest friends, even though we don't work together in the same organization, continue to be some of the closest friends that I've made. A sense that the people that you're working with, not only are they your friends and you care about them, but you share the same approach to work in terms of caring about the quality of the work, believing in the goal of the organization, feeling listened to, people who hear you and you can hear and you hear other people when you're sharing information or telling stories, and just a sense of belonging is really, really important. Then to get to the pinnacle of engagement is when an organization is able to clearly demonstrate that there are opportunities for growth for the individual, and not just growth in terms of, oh, we're going to make you a manager. You're going to go from being, a staff person to a supervisor to a manager and maybe a director someday. but growth that is specific to the individual and what their personal goals are, and growth that is meaningful to the individual, not just growth by rote according to the organization's set hierarchy or management structure. One of the biggest challenges that organizations have, and because libraries are quite structured, is that a great employee will not necessarily make a great supervisor or a great manager. We all have different strengths. Some people love working with people. Other people have fantastic technical strengths, really good at organizing events, incredible attention to detail. I can tell you that as a people person, I usually leave the extraordinarily detailed work to a colleague who has a strength in that area. It's not necessarily me. So when an organization recognizes the strengths of the individual and provides them with an opportunity for growth that is appropriate and suitable and desired by that individual, that is successful employee engagement. Organizations must meet the needs of the three foundational levels to create an environment of trust and support, so that the individuals can move up the pyramid towards a high level of engagement and personal success. So this is going to look pretty familiar to you. I think we have, all of us, been one type of engaged employee or not throughout our careers. So first we have the engaged individual. They're highly involved, they're enthusiastic, they're passionate about what they do. They have a real sense of ownership and proprietary about the work that they're doing, and they have a sense of loyalty and commitment to the organization. They tend to be very high performing because they're loving what they're doing. They're loving where they are. They feel like they're making a difference. And they take a lot of pleasure and personal satisfaction in making the organization a better place to work, and also helping it achieve its goals. Right in the middle, we have the individual who's not engaged. Now, they're not, disengaged, but they're kind of meh. They're not really attached to the work that they do. They're doing their job, and they're doing it in a satisfactory manner, but they don't have a sense of energy or passion or personal commitment to the work. They're there, they're doing their job, but they're not, there's something missing. The energy, the passion isn't there. It's something to pay attention to. Why wouldn't that energy be there? There can be lots of reasons. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then we have, and we've all, perhaps, I know I've been this person, actively disengaged, which happens when, and it can happen, I think, when people are not engaged for quite a long time, and they begin to really feel resentful towards the organization and the work that they're doing. And sometimes they will even act out. And essentially what's happening here is their needs are not being met. They've moved beyond being not engaged into being so actively disengaged that they may actually try to sabotage work that's going on or sabotage someone else's success. This is a terribly dangerous place to be. I know from experience that this is where a lot of back channel chatter can become very negative and can actually harm the organization and give other employees a rather negative idea or dissatisfied, resentful outlook about the organization, about the work they're doing, and everyone that they're working with. Not a great place at all. Let's leave that there for a minute. I want to talk a little bit about the benefits of employee engagement. And I've a lot of the research I did points to each of these. Now, again, this is a diagram from Gallup, so it looks very corporate, talking about things like profitability. But let's take a look at this in through a library lens. So Gallup found that engaged employees bring a lot of benefits to the organization. There is a 78% decrease in absenteeism. Engaged employees want to be at work. There is 58% decrease in safety incidents. So this chart is actually from a study that they did of nurses in healthcare environments. And so it's not so different from working in a public library. You're working with the public, you're working with people who could be feeling unwell, may have some physical, mental, and emotional health challenges. So safety is a really big deal, and it's very, very important. So Gallup found that engaged employees, and these are the nursing staff in a healthcare environment, that patient safety incidents or threats to safety were reduced by 58% among engaged employees. There is a lower rate of turnover, as low as over 20% in high turnover organizations and 51% in low turnover organizations. And so there's always going to be organizations where turnover is just the nature of the organization. But even for with engaged employees, even with higher turnover environments, organizations with engaged employees are going to have up to a 20% reduction in turnover. 28% decrease in theft of stuff in the organization, and a decrease of 63% in safety incidents that would be considered accidental. Less incidents of quality problems, a decrease of 32%. A 10% increase in customer loyalty and engagement. And with libraries, I think that this is particularly telling. An organization with engaged employees have higher productivity. And instead of profitability, let's talk about community engagement. Let's think about that profitability is when we think about that in library land terms, it's more about customer satisfaction. It might be ways of finding creative ways to avoid costs. But for those of us who are working in public libraries, profitability means a community that values the library and understands the value we bring. So engaged employees can bring that about as well. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, maybe not an elephant in the room, something I think we all know, is that library work isn't what it used to be. So being overwhelmed in a library workplace is unfortunately really common these days. one thing that I found in preparing this presentation was just how many articles, podcasts, discussions, studies have been done surrounding the change in the library workplace, and not necessarily a change for the better. We've got communities that are unhappy with the programs that we're running, with the materials that we have on our shelves. We've got increased diverse opinions and expectations around the library and its role in the community. We've got a lot of social issues that are coming right in the front door every single day because we are a community hub. The public library is for everyone. And when a public library is for everyone, it does mean everyone. And in particular, when you are welcome to all, it often means that people who have fewer choices about where they're going to spend their time may find themselves in our library. And it could be to stay warm or become cool or to use the bathroom or find a place that is safer than other choices they may have. And so if that's the case, that means that whatever they are carrying with them, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental, that's coming in our libraries too. And we generally aren't trained in library school, that's for sure, how to work with human beings who are not having the greatest day and may act out or even become violent. And so we're going to come back to this a little bit, but I just wanted to acknowledge that the challenges that we have in the library as our workplaces it's a really, really different place these days. Then there's all the new technology. New technology, we're used to working with that. That's no big deal. But what about technology that actually is capable of generating misinformation and disinformation? Trying to figure out where artificial intelligence fits, making sure that our communities understand that technology like AI, it's an opportunity and it's also a place to feel cautious. Funding reductions, what else is new? That's always something that's happening. And we're in a time of significant political unrest and uncertainty around the world. So all of that adds up to a feeling of being overwhelmed. And I appreciate the slightly crazed look in this woman's eyes that's here in the picture. It can lead to low morale, stress, anxiety, and of course, even burnout. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this presentation talking about burnout and stress, but I have put together a list of sources and resources that talk about it, that acknowledge it, that discuss it. I think it's really important when we're talking about employee engagement to recognize that libraries are far more challenging spaces to work in than they have ever been. We need to acknowledge this in order to treat our colleagues and staff the best possible way we can, acknowledge that they're not robots, they're human beings, that there are things that are happening in our workplace every day that can be really, really challenging. What can be done in order to move towards a deeply engaged workforce, even in the face of challenges like we have today? Well, I've got news for you, directors and managers. It all starts at the top. Directors it's essential that you build trust and communicate the benefits of engagement, and not just talk about it, but actually walk that talk. So it's essential that the directors create the conditions in the workplace so that managers and staff adopt an engagement mindset. If a director can make sure that the conditions are set in order to encourage and create, and I'm thinking of a word and it's not coming to me, but cultivate, that's it, and cultivate a culture of engagement, then management sees that the director is role modeling that and feels comfortable and confident to take that on, to model it as well, which then is modeled to staff. Employee engagement needs to be a primary responsibility for managers. And indeed, managing human beings is not the only thing on your plate. But if the management of your human beings does not take front and center in order to create the best possible environment for staff to excel, then nothing else is going to go right. So it's really important for managers to be very clear with individual staff members about the work that needs to be done and what they need, what needs to be accomplished. But your role is also to provide support and advocate for staff as necessary, and communicate how important workplace engagement is in order to lead to organizational success. And in my mind, to me, it's when you're talking to your colleagues and staff about the importance of engagement, talking about it this way is a little bit textbooky. I would recommend that you frame it in a way that you're actually talking to the individual and recognizing what their interests are, what their goals are, and not talking about employee engagement, but actually being engaged with the people that you're managing to encourage that they become engaged with you. There's always a danger whenever we're looking at something like this for employee engagement to feel false or disingenuous, or, the management book told me to behave this way, so I'm going to behave this way. That's not going to work. It has to be genuine. You have to really embrace it for real. When you, as a manager, show that you care about the individuals, that you care about their goals, both in terms of the workplace, but also in family life and life outside of the workplace, you take an interest, you are caring, you are listening to what they say, understanding what their goals are, and then doing your very best, not only to create the best environment possible for them to do their work successfully in, but for them to feel that it is a place that they want to go to every day. This is a successful workplace with deeply engaged people. They're deeply engaged because they want to be there. They want to be there because you've created an environment that makes them want to be there. They feel valued, they feel listened to, they feel like they count, and they feel that they can achieve their goals by continuing to work for that organization. So for directors out there, what can you do in order to provide your managers with the best possible environment, tools, and resources to help them create a kind of workplace that everybody on staff wants to be a part of? Well, you have to make sure that as a director, that you're not a boss, but you're also a coach. So thinking about what do you need to do to make people feel that it is a director's job to facilitate the success of the organization, to facilitate and guide and support the success of the individuals all the way down the line. When you can provide that environment, then and role model that environment, then that's what your managers and your supervisors are seeing, and that's what everybody else on staff will see too. Consider that consider the need to provide some training for managers and supervisors on how to engage in an authentic way. We're not all going to know this just by sort of nature nurture. Sometimes these are things that we have to learn. And we all know that depending on the type of work environments that we've been in before, we may have seen really positive, engaged behavior. And we also probably have not seen that type of behavior. So despite whether we all intrinsically know things or not, the training piece is really, really important. That's why I'm so glad you guys are all hanging out with me today. Think about how you can make sure that the priorities of and expectations of your managers are really clear, really unambiguous, so that your managers and supervisors could do the same for their colleagues. And I'd recommend focusing on staff strengths and focusing on what they do best. And of course, there's always going to be things that don't go well, that, mistakes are made. Shoot, we're human, of course. These things are going to happen. But I would be 98% sure then that when a mistake happens, the person who was involved in that error, they know. You don't have to tell them that something's not gone well. They know. And people who are who have made a mistake, I mean, we all know what it feels like to make a mistake, and you feel just awful about it. So as a manager and a director and a supervisor, your job is to acknowledge the mistake, but taking a look at where the strengths are, where the learning came from, acknowledging the mistake. Don't sweep it under the rug, but focus on moving forward. What can be done differently? What did we learn? One thing that I put at the end of this slide is just a gentle reminder that micromanaging is neither meaningful nor engaging. I've had micromanagers before, and it can be possibly the best way to get someone to disengage. Not recommended. So it's not really about micromanagement. It's about paying attention, listening, talking to your colleagues, listening to their frustrations, listening to what's happening in their day, and doing your best to create an environment to help them succeed. The one thing I always appreciate is many years ago when I was much earlier in my career, I was lucky to have quite a great manager. And I was working at IBM Canada, and my manager, I thought that she was just great. I was in my late 20s. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And she was just so supportive of me. And the one thing I remember her telling me was, my job is to keep the stuff from rolling downhill. So in her job, there might be any amount of stuff happening that she had to deal with. And what she tried to do for me and my teammates was to manage all the stuff above her so that we could focus on the job that she wanted us to do. I've always remembered her telling me that. I think it's really important. So let's talk about libraries specifically. During the research that I did, I came across this source. Now there's two things attached to this. The book itself by Elena Norlin, The 6-Step Guide to Library Worker Engagement, I have not read, but I have read an excerpt of. And there is a podcast and the transcript that goes along with this. And it's part of the Library Leadership Podcast. And the link is here, but it's also in the list of sources that I've had. And in this slide, I've just captured some of the, sorry, I just need to make this a bit bigger. Some of the key points that really stood out to me. And I know this is a bit small, so patience, and I'll just read a bit and you can go back and take a look a bit later. Thinking about the director of an organization, who's really a conductor, and their job is to figure out how to put this group of people together who have all different strengths and talents and skills. How do we put people together in order to create harmony as a conductor, harmony in the orchestra, in the organization? And how can the director be the coach, the guide, to help move individuals forward and thereby the organization forward? Another one she mentions is that organizations where she has seen where people have been genuinely happy, they feel that their individual skills and talents and abilities are appreciated, recognized, seen, valued. And as a result, they feel that the organization has their back. So they're pretty comfortable having the organization's back too. It's really important for directors to hire managers that have empathy, that have the right skill set, who are focused on making sure their people have the best possible environment to excel in. Soft skills, listening, understanding, and thinking about how to motivate people and to listen even when they're not having the best day. Finally, and there are so many good nuggets in this, but I think this is true. Elena says, for the most part, people want to do their best in the organization. They want to be seen who they are as an individual with their unique skills and talents and personalities. Human beings generally want to excel. They want to take pride in their work. So let's figure out how to make that happen. It can be really empowering as a supervisor, a manager, a director, to realize that you have the ability to empower the people around you. Isn't that a wonderful feeling, knowing that you can actually contribute to someone's success and happiness in that way? And trust. We all know trust is can take ages and ages and ages to build, and unfortunately can be very quickly torn apart. But the number one thing that Norlin says about trust is that in the really successful organizations, the ones that have a higher level of engagement among their organization, the highest amount of productivity, achievement, happiness among individuals. Also, the people who work there have a huge amount of trust in the organization and in the human beings that they're working with and that they're working for. To this end, One of the several ways of working towards building this trust is recognizing staff's accomplishments, recognizing when they've done well, and valuing their individual talents and skills. Acknowledging what's meaningful to them. And that is in terms of rewards, compensation, work environment, work-life balance, recognizing that someone who is a parent of a young family is different from someone who is closer to retirement versus someone who is early in their career. Everyone has different desires and needs, and needs to have the workplace recognize those differences, and provide environments accordingly. Finding ways to support all your colleagues so that they can blossom at work, and using performance reviews, the dreaded performance review, as opportunities to celebrate accomplishments as opposed to focusing on errors. Couple things that I've learned over the years is when it comes to day-to-day work, occasionally stuff happens. There are, outcomes that were unexpected or not great. Really best to address those in the moment, and then move forward. So don't sweep it under the rug, address it, talk about it, move on. Do not let that fester until you get to a performance review. My goodness, that is quite possibly the worst thing that you can do. I've another manager who I found really great, certainly for me and my personality and the way that I like to work. She always used our performance reviews to go over a matrix that she had created that I was completely aware of, that outlined the roles and responsibilities for my job. And we would spend time saying, yep, Kim, check, good job, good job. Oops, okay, we're nearly done that. We haven't quite achieved that goal, but we're on our way. Great. And then recognizing if there's anything that was missed. And it was very collaborative. And perhaps the most important part was that we saved a lot of time talking about where I wanted to go with my career. What did I want to do with the role that I had? And was there a way that she could help me get there? The final thing that I'll say is that it is well known that people don't quit jobs, they quit managers. It is so important as a supervisor, as a manager, as a director, to recognize that if people are unhappy, there's a lot of reasons why they might be unhappy. But there are some things that you can do in the workplace to address it. It's not necessarily true that everything that a person might be having to deal with in day-to-day life can be resolved in the workplace, but I can tell you for sure that it can certainly be acknowledged, even privately and confidentially. And with all of the stresses that might be happening in someone's life outside of the workplace, at least if they choose to share, acknowledging that there are frustrations, and not just pretending that staff aren't human beings. They're absolutely human beings, and so are you. So now that I've gone on for almost 50 minutes, I would love to hear from everyone who's attending today. I see that we have 13 souls out there who've been listening, and I would just love for everyone to consider sharing or asking a question, or if you'd like to go back to a slide, and we can take a look. And I'm just going to make my window here a little bit bigger so that I can see you guys. Now, is there anybody here that I can pick on that I know? Let me see. Jeffrey?
Yes.
Give me a scenario, don't name any names, when you've had really positive engagement in an organization. Just to get the crowd going here.
Overall, I would say most of my experiences were pretty good, and most of my managers were pretty good. I did have an experience with a micromanaging manager, and it was very frustrating. You know, it's like you would do something and then they'd come and ask you to do it again, or it's like, well, I've already done it, or it wasn't done well enough, or they would take control of it. It was just not a good work environment for me at all. It was very frustrating.
Yeah, I'm sure that you felt it claustrophobic, even.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yeah, it's funny how we can, even if that person is not literally like hovering over you, we sort of manifest that feeling, even when they may be sitting 2 desks over or something.
Yeah, I just felt nothing was ever done correctly, even though it was. There was always something to nitpick. It was never right, never done right.
Yeah, definitely not a successful approach.
No.
I'll ask again out there, friends. Tell me a story. Oh dear, we have crickets.
And feel free to type it in the chat if you don't want to talk over the microphone.
Absolutely.
I'll ask a question, Kimberly.
Oh, please.
Great. So first of all, thank you so much. I really enjoyed your presentation today. So I'm curious, with the research that you did, was there any advice or engagement given to directors as far as like how to kind of roll out changes, particularly to managers, on how to approach things strategically? Because we have to be adaptable in the current library environment. And so sometimes, as far as like, there are various things that we kind of have to pivot on, and that can be really hard for a lot of people. And so sometimes I feel like I'm like the cox swaying, calling out, let's row together.
We're going this way.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, everyone is like rowing, and I mean, like, they're engaged, but people have different paces. And so, trying to kind of even out that stroke. I didn't know if there was anything you came across that.
That's a great question. What's interesting is I was reading Harvard Business Review. I read a lot of Gallup. And Deloitte has a couple of articles on it. I think that what I took from all of that is, with leadership, ideally you want to be a leader that you want, maybe not even a leader, you want to be the person that people want to hang with, right? So when I've been a manager, or even when I'm teaching at the iSchool at the University of Toronto, I've got a room of 35 students. Now they've paid to be there, so ostensibly they want to be there, but so and I feel like, okay, everyone, we're going to talk about this today, and this is, you know, our goal for this course, and this is where we're going. And so thinking about how that aligns with being in an organization is being really clear about where we want to go, being as clear as you can about how you intend to get there, and knowing that that could change. That, that we're going to kind of go this direction, and then something happens, something in the external environment happens, but we're all going to still work together, but we're going to kind of pivot. And to perhaps most importantly, listen. So listen at the individual level when there's people who are saying, whoa, 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 I've got the wrong end of the oar. Hold on, hold on. Or wait, I thought we were going that way. What happened? So stop, listen, pay attention and respect what people are saying to you. And the one thing that struck me most about the research that I read is that it seems a little bit silly to say, we're going to be an engaged organization. Engage. I said engage. You know, that's not going to work. So more like being that person. And by adopting these practices, and my dog is about to join the webinar. There he is. And by taking on these, being an engaged person yourself and treating people with respect, appreciating the differences, appreciating the different conditions that they're working with, taking time to listen and to acknowledge strengths. And by being engaged with the people who you hope will follow you, I think they'll probably follow you. And then there's always the 20% that doesn't, right? It's always an 80-20 thing. And what I see in the literature is words like care, compassion. And at a certain point, there might be someone in your boat who might do better in a different role than with an oar, say. And so just considering that, you know, we're living in a pretty complex world and everybody has a lot of stuff going on, and that the person that they're bringing to the workplace is more than the person in the workplace, and,
Right.
and appreciating that. So great question, Sarah. I hope that helped a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anything else? Come on, you guys. All right, well, I'm going to, while everyone's thinking about what they would like to share, I'm just going to bring up the other slides, Jeffrey, that have the resources on them. So I've got them right here. All right, let's see here. All right, here we go. So what I did with this is in the slides, anything that I have included, like the diagram from Gallup and some of the quotes from the podcast about employee engagement in libraries, I have added the direct source in that slide. And then here, I've just put all kinds of stuff that I came across as I was preparing this presentation. So the first part, the first page is engagement, employee engagement techniques. The first bit is specific to libraries. And then the second one is more general. So you'll see that there's sources here from Gallup. There's an interesting article on how to help an underperformer, which might have been a component of Sarah's question. And I was really excited to read that. And when I read it, it really was be compassionate. Listen, something's going on with someone. If we can be safe in assuming that people have the best intentions to bring their best selves to the workplace and to do the best job they can, and I think that's a safe assumption to make, then when someone is underperforming, something else is going on. It may have nothing to do with the job itself, but it's certainly having an impact on the job. So so trying to engage with that individual is one approach, and probably the best approach to working with someone who's underperforming. But again, it could be that maybe they're in the wrong job, you know, maybe they thought that, you know, they wanted to become a branch manager and then found out that that's maybe not their bag. What are some other ways for them to achieve through the organization? The next one, let's see here, is a series of articles about trends in the modern library workplace. And I use the word modern, not really tongue-in-cheek, but it's a very nice, safe way to talk about some of the crazy that's going on out there these days. So there's some really neat reports that talk about the state of America's libraries. There's one specifically that talks about the library employment landscape from 2021. So it's immediately like just at the end of COVID, and how are we going to recreate like the community hub that we've worked so hard to build and to nurture before everybody was told to stay home and don't touch other people. There's a lot of neat articles that talk about stress in the library workplace, trauma. There is let me see if I can find it. Emotional labor. Okay, so I had not come across this term before. Emotional labor is something that anyone who is working in public service, in a public-facing job, where we are working with ordinary people every single day, but our job is not necessarily there's a lot of human contact and a lot of human communication exchange in the work that we do. Most of us who work in libraries do it because we feel strongly about helping people, about, you know, we could be tech geeks like me too, and yeah, I love metadata, don't get me wrong, but I'm actually really interested in the community, and it feels very rewarding when I can help someone. It is equally awful when someone loses it on me, or someone is yelling, or someone's in pain, or someone is having an episode. or they're in danger somehow. When these things happen in our libraries, in our workplaces, it really hits. And we're often trying to help people who are struggling to help themselves. And we need to recognize that this stuff is real and it has an impact on our emotional health. And so the article that talks about emotional labor, which is also the case for people who like nurses in healthcare, there's a lot of articles that talk about healthcare workers and social workers. And despite the fact that we want to help people, we cannot ignore the fact that we are susceptible to emotional harm and trauma as a result. It's just the way it is. So there's a few articles here talking about the librarians are not okay. There is a fantastic project that was built around this that Info People did over at the state of California, talking about library worker trauma before and during COVID-19, what happens after. So there's a podcast with the full transcript and a whole series of resources to dig deeper into this, which we haven't done today, but I've put them there. There is another phrase that you've probably heard called quiet quitting. And that is really begins when employees are not engaged and they're withdrawing. And at some point they're getting their work done, but then they're not. And it might be the form of a disengaged employee, but it's not presenting as acting out necessarily. It's more a withdrawal of energy, of passion, of interest, of feeling invested, and that is also something that's been happening in the workplace. And by the way, not just libraries, across the board. So Gallup has a report on the state of the workplace, and you'll see that consistently across sectors, whether people are working in public service or not, that lots of people are struggling. They're having a really hard time feeling engaged and feeling connected. So it's real. We can't ignore it. The last page, narrows down into articles on trauma and burnout, specifically in libraries. It's important to acknowledge that this is happening and continues to happen. There is a lot of talk about self-care, how it's important for organizations to make sure staff have the opportunity for self-care. But it's also as important to acknowledge that it's not necessarily up to the employee to solve this problem through self-care. The organization has to take on some responsibility too. Because if the organization wants to have engaged employees, then they're going to have to engage with the employee. And this two-way street has to be established, and it has to be used. You can't just distribute a piece of paper talking about self-care and do nothing else. Everybody in the organization, particularly in leadership roles, in the directors, the managers, the supervisors, they need to actually invest in it. They need to do it They need to demonstrate that they're doing it. No one ever wants to feel like they're the weak link, right? So when the leaders in an organization acknowledge that they too need self-care, that they want an organization that is going to be compassionate and understanding, and as much as they can be flexible and aware of what individual needs and goals are, then you're going to have a better environment than if you didn't do those things. So don't want to shove it under the rug. It's got to be acknowledged. And perhaps most importantly, this is not a box you check. Okay, self-care, we're done, moving on. No, it's got to be something that the organization is heavily invested in, that the leadership lives and breathes and embodies and demonstrates and participates in, so that it becomes the culture, a cultural norm to have a compassionate workplace. So lots of sources. We'll keep you all busy. Let me make sure. I think that's it. Yeah. So I'll ask again. Any questions out there? Anything people would like to share? I'm counting to 10. Let me see here. Well, Jeffrey, what do you think?
Nobody else has anything else. I guess we can go ahead and wrap up.
Well, it's been a pleasure sharing what I learned with you today. And next week we're going to have, oh, thank you, Eddie. Next week we're going to have a webinar that is going to talk about moving from staff to supervisor. So for those fabulous organizations that provide growth opportunities, how do you actually stick handle that? So I'm looking forward to seeing everyone next week.
All right, well, we'll see you next week. And Kimberly, thank you very much for your presentation again. It's come through for us very well, and we appreciate it. And we will see you next week. And I will do a recording, and I will also be sending an email out with the sources that Kimberly showed you, as well as the PowerPoint presentation. All right. Everybody have a good day. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.